Hey everyone, here's the ultimate guide to combat in 007 First Light. I'll be covering both unarmed close quarters combat as well as the guns in this game because you gotta be a master of both to be James Bond. Now, there are some fights in this game that are just harder, like the brood type enemies here, but you can do some pretty crazy combos like this to almost stun lock them, as you see here. And watching out for any of those red attacks, you can see if you do the charge attack with the right bumper and then press the square or X button to follow up with an attack just like that, you can just stagger lock some of the most hard enemies in this game easily. So we'll be first starting off with close quarters combat. Now, typically it's best to do things if you can with stealth takedowns like this, as it's much better than having to fight off a ton of guards all at once, because if you can take out a single one and hopefully not have anyone else notice nearby, you can typically get out unscathed. Now, whenever you see those red marks there, that is an attack that you're not able to parry, so you're going to have to sidestep, which is basically the dodge. This is using the A button on Xbox or X on PlayStation 5 to be able to jump out of the way. The parries are for those yellow attacks there. Now, the timing of the parries is kind of tight depending on the difficulty mode that you've selected, but you don't want to miss out on those because you can end up getting stun locked like that. You'll block it, and then you can follow up after a parry with either a grab attack using the right trigger or R2, or you can then go with a takedown if it stagger them enough. Now, typically enemies are going to have 1 to 3 attacks that they'll throw at you in a row, so if you see one yellow attack, you're likely going to have another one coming afterwards. So sometimes it's best to play a little bit more defensively and don't end up like what happened there, where I almost ended up getting taken out by a single attack there just because I missed the timing on that. Now, anytime you're able to get a takedown, the best part about takedowns is you have invincibility. So if you're surrounded by a ton of enemies and you see that takedown prompt pop up, which is pressing the X and A button on Xbox or square and X on PlayStation, that's going to be your most ideal option. Grabbing attacks are great. If any enemies are blocking, it's best to go with the grab attack, but as you've seen here, you can just go with a staggering attack by pressing the right bumper, which you do that shoulder check, and pressing the right bumper and then the X or square button to follow up with another attack. And as you saw there, this is a brood enemy, which are much more challenging, and he wasn't able to do anything because we could just continually keep smashing him into the wall. So don't be afraid to use that right bumper, which is typically used to do like a rushing attack. It's also great if you grappled onto an enemy, you can do that too. And whenever you're doing close quarter fights like this, sometimes it's best to try and bait an enemy out and get them one by one. Now, when it comes to gunplay, things are a little bit different here because headshots in this game are insanely valuable. So as you saw there, you can press the left control stick to go into your focus mode. You'll see the focus meter on the left hand side of your screen, so you should always be checking that. We always want to be using our gadgets and focus whenever possible, and gadgets are really useful because you see there we create a bunch of smoke, which helped out in that area as it's lining obscuring targets. But you can also use like the laser to shoot enemies' weapons out of their hands. So you saw there I shot their hands. You can also shoot their hands or their legs, but typically headshots are going to be best unless you're overwhelmed by a ton of enemies. Then you can shoot at their hands. You can also shoot grenades out of the air, and there's a challenge for doing that, but you always want to be watching out for grenades because they can basically take you out immediately. So always be on the lookout for those little red markers there. Whenever you're in a gunfight too, you always need cover. Pressing the right bumper lets you run to the next available cover, which is something you're going to want to do often, and you can also hold it down to be able to sprint towards it. Some cover will get destroyed, like the boxes there, where other cover you can actually shoot through it yourself, which is kind of funny, but the angle in which James Bond is able to shoot kind of works out in your favor sometimes. So sometimes you can actually shoot from behind something without being shot at yourself. There's going to be a variety of different things that'll be like that, but again, always be aiming for the head. It's just so much more valuable to get headshots in this game, especially if ammo's tight. Sometimes it's just best to ping away with a couple headshots, and always be looking out for explosives. There's typically a ton of explosives in this game. You see here, whenever you're actually in a gunfight and someone's in close quarters combat, always do melee against them unless you have a shotgun and you're overwhelmed by the amount of targets, because you can grapple onto them by pressing that right back trigger and just slam them into the wall. That's going to be much better than wasting your valuable resource ammunition. And you've seen here with an explosion and a bunch of smoke, the enemies weren't able to see me, but if you see the flares from their guns from shots, you can always just shoot at them yourself. Now, anytime you get a long range gun, even the longest range guns have a harder time of hitting, but I find the bullets for whatever reason seem to like almost curve and hit enemies. So yeah, always be aiming for the head unless you have a sniper rifle, because sometimes these can take it out with body shots. So using your focus mode makes things a lot smoother, especially if you're getting shot at by a bunch of enemies here. So that's the ultimate guide to combat in James Bond 007 First Light. If this video is useful, please hit the subscribe button below. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll catch you in the next one.